Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us here at Lions Guide. And we've been seeing it on a lot of commercial these days. Fortune favors the bold. I looked it up, and I know all these quotes get accredited to different people, but Google told me it was accredited to Virgil. So fortune favors the bold. That's what we're going to talk about today. And, we're going to talk about being brave, taking risks, and the fact that when you do these things, you're often rewarded. That's why ancient proverbs like that exist, to kind of reiterate that fact that fortune does, in fact, favor the bold. And that calls for us to kind of take bold actions and not be afraid of stepping out of our comfort zones. And so over the last few weeks, we've been talking, through the Lions Guide core values and what's important for us and what we stand for and how we're trying to help people in that regard. And being bold and courageous is actually our 5th out of 6 core values. And we wanted to kind of jump into that today, what that means, why we chose it, and more importantly, why is it important to you and us and everybody else. So if you don't know me and your first time here, I'm Dale Walls. I'm the founder of Lions Guide, and I'm joined by my fellow co-founders, Jay Teagues, who's our high performance director, and Keith Flip Griffin, who is our leadership development director. And what we do at Lions Guide is we help empower people with the power of leadership, really, whether it's leading yourself or leading others. We've got programs, training, courses, workshops, and so on and so forth, whether you're the everyday person, the mom, the dad, the coach, the teacher, the husband, the wife, the career guy running a team. It's all about leadership. If you want to have a joyful, fulfilling life, you've got to lead the way to that. And that's what we do here at Lions Guide. And here on the Lions Guide podcast, we chop it up, talk about those things. So first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, hey, welcome back. Gents, be bold and courageous. This is right up the do hard things alley, Jay. So I'll let you jump into this first. What are your thoughts on that? How do we get here talking about being bold and courageous?
Yeah, I think anything that worth a damn that has anything worthwhile in my life has come from taking like courageous action, like identifying the fear and doing it anyway. And so my mantra has always been, do the hard thing, and that requires, punching fear in the face and taking action despite the fear. And that's what high performing people do. They acknowledge that. I mean, some people get paralyzed by fear and they get stuck and they do the analysis by paralysis, or they just, we're biologically wired to, go to where we're safe. But, anything worthwhile, we look at fear in a different way, and we demonstrate boldness by facing the fear and overcoming it anyway. And typically, doing the harder thing will lead to more success. And so I love this one. I love this value.
Yeah. And, and when it comes to leadership, Flip, right? Like this is my, look, I'm going to be half political. I don't know if it's politics today. It's just kind of the way I feel. Like, I think people are afraid to lead today, right? I think there's a lack of leadership has to do with people, not being bold enough to step in, because, being the leader is hard. It takes, an element of this. Flip, what do you think? Where's this fit in the leadership side of things?
I have to, I look at it a little differently. And I agree about the big, bold, courageously fear, punch it. I agree with that. I agree. There are moments like that you have to have. And the way I look at it really is more about everyday courage that you do, right? To do little things, right? Because it's really, sometimes you could get punched in the face with like a medical issue, right? And you're like, oh crap, I got to change my life. And you got to take these big, bold, courageous, whether you wanted to or not, and something's pushing you. I look at the courage of like to do little stuff, right? The people that, do little things every single day, and it adds up. It becomes this very bold statement for themselves over time. And those to me sometimes are harder in some respects to do. And so when I look at the courage, I look at courage and from that perspective is from a everyday perspective of saying, look, sometimes it's just about getting up during the day, right? Like sometimes it's about getting up out of bed, right? When it comes to, like veteran suicide's a great one of sometimes it's the small little things that become, right? They're very courageous steps about maybe not taking that drink that day. That may be it's tiny, but it's so courageous for yourself internally. And I look at this one for us and for me, and I look at very internalized of, these little things. Like it's easy to pick out the huge big ones, and you should, And to Jay's point, I'm all about, like, you want to change your life, go do something that you're totally scared of doing and just punch it in the face, do something incredibly hard that you maybe never thought you could. But there's steps usually to get to that point, and those little steps are the ones that I don't want lost in the fact, right? I think the easy ones are not easy, but the highlighted, showboating, here's the lights, come to us, that those are needed. And I think the little ones too are part of this whole thing, right? You don't get to be able to do the huge things without taking those small internal steps that no one sees, right? Like that you're looking in the mirror. Those to me are the ones I like to focus on about being courageous and being bold. And they're not the ones that are publicized. And so but I think they're as, if not more important to me, to doing that. So
well, I think I'm with you, and I'll bridge the two because it's relative, right? It's relative. I know, the work, Jay and I have both done for 22-0 volunteer. And to your point, like working with, vets and other folks, everyone, there's PTSD trauma everywhere, right? And that's actually a point I need to make. I found I had to make it a part of my rapport building with 22-0 clients to say, look, trauma is trauma and it's relative, right? It's how it impacted you. I was like, funny, not funny example, but a 16-year-old girl going to prom gets ketchup on her dress and it just devastates her. Like that's a traumatic event. Now, to your point, that could seem like a little thing, or not taking that drink today could seem like a little thing, but in their own regard, in those situations and those people and the relative impact to that person at the time, is either traumatic or courageous, whatever the situation is. But you're right. I mean, it's everywhere, right? We talk about everyday people everywhere, right? Like because you're right. And the reason I would have to say that to, and just to kind of co-sign here, when I would work with veterans to help them clear their PTSD, like they would try to say, well, it's just about the combat. It's just about this or just about that. But meanwhile, they had like real childhood trauma. It's like, dude, no, we're going to clear all that. And we're not just here about the service, we're about the trauma. And so, but to them, right, they were very much, well, that's insignificant. That was when I was a kid that, I saw bad things, but it's relative. If it's affecting you, if it's holding you back, if it's something that you've got to take a big change, but and I think that the other point I want to make on this flip that came to me was that, sometimes I think people hide from the little things a little bit because they feel it's insignificant, right? Like in comparison to other grandiose things. To your point, I'll keep picking on not taking a drink today. If you got a problem with alcohol, the courage to not take that drink today, people might feel like that's a small thing, but in their world, it's huge. It's huge. It's a big change. So, yeah. Jay, you got anything on that?
Yeah, stop comparing. I mean, everything we're trying to compare. And I've had people, working with trauma. Well, because I've helped some people with navigate trauma from like a car accident or a relationship issue. And they're like, well, and we start that rapport building process. I've got a trauma, but it's not like what you experienced in combat. Well, to your point, trauma is trauma and it's relative. And we have to stop comparing these things because it doesn't do you any good. The trauma has left an imprint in your mind. And yeah, so the only other thing I'd like to add is to Flip's point. Sometimes being bold in everyday leadership, it's being assertive. We talk a lot about being assertive here, and it's telling people what you want. It's stepping up and being transparent. It's telling the truth. When everyone's shaking their head yes in the boardroom because the boss is saying one thing and everyone wants to agree, but in your heart, you get that tingly feeling, you get that gut feeling that this isn't right. It's being the one that says, hey, red flag on the play here. Let's talk about this. And this is because I've been in those situations where people just cower. They're scared of judgment. They're scared of opinions. They don't want to stand out. But I have found by being the one that's bold enough to say what I am thinking, it doesn't always go well. It's always not received well. But it tends to go better than not. And I tend to build more trust and people will confide in me more because I'm willing to do that. And so sometimes being bold is just in conversation, right? Telling your true feelings. So.
Yeah, it's something I did a little piece on a year or so ago, which was like, you go in all these organizations and their core values, everyone's got integrity on the wall. Integrity. We believe in integrity here. It's like, man, no kidding. Like, I hope every organization believes in integrity. Why we still got to write it on the wall? Integrity being, how I was taught, at least, was doing the right thing even when no one's looking. And I said, I want to put courage on the wall and say, to your point, Jay, do the right thing even when everybody's looking, right? You're sitting there in the boardroom and everyone knows that elephant's in the room, but no one's going to say it, right? No one's going to say it. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, be the one, despite the fact that everyone's going to see you step up, and you might fail, or you might get, lashed at, or you might get pushback or whatever, but you're still going to speak up and do the right thing, right? It's courage being a virtue, the choosing of a greater good over a lesser good, right? Doing the right thing, despite those fears, so to speak. Yeah.
We got to call out the elephants in the room. And sometimes that takes being bold, because a lot of people won't do it.
And today I think it's just getting hard. I mean, I unfortunately I see, like, to the point, the fear of judgment, the fear of comparison, all these things. We're in such this like social media world, and just so many people have a stage to like judge and call out, or without, I don't know. Again, I'll go. I don't want to go back to like the whole thing about how we're meant to communicate, but people get to hide behind a little, 100, letter text to kind of judge you, or kind of, give some pushback or whatever. And I think it's hard. It's tough. I mean, I'll give, but that doesn't mean it's not necessary, right? Just because, where everyone's watching everyone in every way, shape, or form these days doesn't mean we can't step up and, do the right thing, or be bold, or go after our goals the way we want.
Yeah. Being bold is, I don't know, it comes in a variety of different forms, shapes, and sizes. It's relative to everyone, but it's ultimately being assertive and being transparent and going after what you want consistently. And high-performing people do this regularly. It's something that it can be trained. It's malleable. It's something that the more you do it, the more comfortable you become with it. And so it's a muscle that, just like the gym, right? We can go and work. We can work out this muscle and demonstrate boldness more often, and we need to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the neuroplasticity piece of this, right? Like, if you're always cowering, you're always fearing, you always run away from these issues, or every time this event or this person or this challenge comes up, you're running away, and you got to break that rut, right? You've got to flip the switch and start trying something different and learn from that, right? That's how we learn, right? To your point, in a way, it is like a muscle, right? The more you practice, that willful, progress, despite your anxieties and your fears and whatever, you're still, you're making that a habit, right? You're making being bold and courageous a habit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think too, we have these fallacies that we cling to, and the world clings to, about like, oh, it's got to be movie stars, or it's got to be, NBA or NFL, and all these kind of, idols that we have out there that for right. So like, people love sports. They love to, I get it. I understand all that. But I do look at I don't think I think it's a very mundane, like, I'll give you a great example. Like, I've always thought this, and I don't know how you got, I always thought that my job when I deployed was way easier than my wife's job back home. And though it became routine and she had her own pattern when I was gone, I think we feel a lot. And I can remember her not, at moments in time, not thinking that her job, because she wasn't going out and doing, creating a paycheck, I can remember her kind of thinking, and I know in my mind, and I know a lot of service members with myself, and I'm sure this crosses all the boundaries, not just military, but like, there's a lot of jobs that we look at that are very ordinary, that we take for granted, that take a ton of courage, way more than the highlighted, profiled, things with this. That's why I really take the two categories of, when you say bold and courageous, you think about a knight in shining armor and what am I, slay the dragon. And that's, like, that's the bold that we need those pieces in our lives, to Jay's point, to go jump off a building, to release something, to find yourself, to break through a barrier. Those bold and courageous pieces are 100% needed in everybody's life, and it needs to be shaken up, right? Hit the blender every now and again on your life and go, what do I got now, right? That's, to me, one piece of it. It's the other side that's the everyday courage, the everyday being bold, which it's not just about being in a room and speaking up and all that kind of stuff, because we all know the dynamics sometimes of how those play out. I just look at it as like, everybody's fighting battles that nobody knows about, right? Like everybody's doing that. And those have to be, when you talk to someone or you bring some, like those have to be called out and exemplified and recognized as, man, dude, for all the crap you have going on, that you're here doing work or doing things, like you want to talk about being a leader and recognizing that inside of one of your team members and calling him out, maybe not in front of everybody, but dude, call out that courage, that everyday stuff. When you know that somebody's overcoming something that may seem simple to everybody else, but it's not for them, that to me, man, it's courage on that leader's part to see that and to call it out. And it's courage and those little courage and boldness of those people just to, again, it might be just showing up to work and doing their job, but they're overcoming a million things. Like when we've all talked about all of the stuff that we have all going on, like to me, that's the courage that, again, really needs to be recognized and be, it doesn't have to be the dragon slaying one, even though those are, to me, they're equally important as to kind of, just everyday life and in leadership, right? It has to be those kind of two categories for me of being bold and being courageous.
I think that's still in the same alley of like, it's still a dragon, right? It's not the grandiose, one, so to speak, but to that person, the fact that they're dealing with a ton.
They may not even see that though, right? To them, though, they may be like, I'm just coming to work. Like you have to come and call that. Sometimes it's like, it's self-deception. Like we don't even see that we're fighting. We're just like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. But yet someone else may be like, oh, dude, that's all. Like if you're a leader and you could you know your people, right? That's another thing to figure this all out. You could call those out and help. Like how much does that help when you're like, hey man, I know you're just coming to work. I know you're doing your thing right now. I know you're going through a ton of stuff, but I just want to appreciate, I want to thank you and appreciate for just doing this. And it would crush me, but dude, you're crushing it. And that's awesome. Yeah. Right. And they may not even, again, it's unrecognizable. It's self-deceived that they're doing something major when you're like, it's okay. Right. We just said this the whole time. We're like, it's perception. It's everybody's reality. It's different, but call that out. Like, definitely that's a recognition point of being courageous and being bold too, as well as that other side of it. So,
well, shameless plug, right? You're talking like this month in our leadership mastery group, we're going through encouragement, right? And the role of encouragement in your leadership toolbox, right? So you're talking about, and I just want to make this point for the listeners, right? Understanding the difference between praise and acknowledgement. And that's what you just described, right? Praise is like, hey, good job, pat on the back, good job. But acknowledgement, as you just put it, which is so much more powerful to go, hey, man, I know you might think you're just doing your job, but I know you're dealing with a lot at home. And I really want to say, I appreciate how you're showing up and you're powering through this. And despite what's on your shoulders, you're still getting it done, or acknowledging that someone has really grown in their role, or that's acknowledgement. And the pat on the back stuff can feel like, if it's not authentic, it can feel like just the check in the box. But really, when that authenticity gets driven home, and you go, wow, Sally, I see that this whole week you've been killing it. Like, in fact, this last year compared to where you were last year, you've grown so much. I'm so proud of you. Right? Boom. That's giving the gift of courage, right? Like that's encouragement. So I'm glad you brought that up. Jay, you got anything on that?
It's I think of Jordan Peterson talking about being a monster. He's got that it's having the strength when things be the person that has the strength that other people can lean on. Like you don't fall apart when there's tragedy that happens. Not to say that you're not feeling emotions, but you're just there to be the leader for everyone else around you. And that's, to me, that's everyday courage. And I think that we need to find opportunities to be bold and courageous in a controlled environment. Hence, why I like jumping from buildings and jumping from a plane or doing an endurance event, so I can test my mettle and put myself in a controlled environment to see what I can do. And that translates well when life gets hard. And it surely does.
Well,
So,
well, I wanted to hit on this point, right? Like, because all these, core values for us came from, us sitting down for 2 days and really digging in, going, what are we going to do here, right? And I was going, courage is on the board, right? And we talked about that, right? Because courage being the virtue, doing the right thing, but jumping off the building, is bold, right? Like it's choosing to be bold, and we talked about the difference between bold and courageous, and we said, because to me, like, bold is like, take the brakes off, man. Like, go try new things, right? It doesn't need to be like, saving a cat out of a burning building all the time, so to speak, but go, hey man, you want to try something new? Like, be bold, take the brakes off, go do it. And that's, so I'm glad you kind of hit on that, right? And that's why we landed on, we want to be both, right? We do want to go, jump off the building to try something new, or go, I'm a big Jordan Peterson guy too. Like, he always points out, go into the forest where it's most darkest, right? Enter the forest where it's darkest to you, which is talking about, go lean into your fears, lean into the darkness and what the things that are holding you back.
Well, in the pillar for high performance, it's not just courage, it's demonstrate courage. So finding opportunities for you to demonstrate courage, you're training your brain, you're rewiring your brain. And the more that you do that, the better that you're able to handle fear, because fear is common to everyone. I mean, I'm terrified of heights. I'm absolutely, like, jumping off the building and jumping out of a plane is terrifying for me. But the more that I've done it, the reps that I put in, I mean, I just look at fear a little bit differently. I have the, oh my God, I'm going to die. But then I just kind of go through my own little woosah moment. I'm like, I'm going to be okay, right? I got the equipment. I kind of go through the mental checklist of, they got a great track record. Planes are remarkably safe. It's probably more dangerous for me to drive here than it was to actually fly up here. I've got someone on my back who knows what they're doing. Like, you go through the risk mitigation process, and it turned out to be an exhilarating experience. So much so that we did it again. and so, but there's a lot of people out there that, nope, I'm just not dealing with it. I'm just not going to put myself out there. But I think we need to find what it's relative to everyone. But find opportunities to demonstrate courage in your life, and you will be better for it in so many ways. It translates well into your leadership.
Yeah, like being an engaged father with triplets or with 3 kids, right? You want to talk about everyday courage of oh my God, I gotta go fight this battle because I know it's going to be super important for my daughter in the long run, that I'm showing her that I could be courageous, right? Because it reflects, right? It's chronic versus acute. It's a, the chronic part that's going to take is you battling every single day to be an engaged father, or an engaged mother, an engaged parent, right? To the extent that you can. How easy is it to go, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm taking time out, versus, dude, I'm gonna spend 7 hours, I'm gonna call 16 people because I need to send an email to a school administrator and be like, hey, this is wrong. I'm going to tell you it's wrong. And because, whether your kids know it or not, or whether they see it or not, right? It's playing the long game over something, and being courageous in that. Like, I think those are that's the harder one, right? Like that's the hard one to be able to do. And not to say that if you've never jumped off a building or that you're scared of heights, that's not hard. That is absolutely as well terrifying, Jay. I think the other side of it, though, is that the long drawn out, not the TNT type things, I think is also, it's just like I said, that to me, that has to be recognized. The ones like, being an engaged dad to me is courageous. Like,
engaging,
whether
right?
you should
Like
or not.
The courage to engage, right? In the green room, we were talking about the importance of reconciliation, and so the courage to fix a problem, right? To engage with someone else and I picked this up, hashtag courage. Like there's a great book out there called The Courage to Be Disliked, right? And it really kind of dives into, Adlerian psychology and understanding, and Adlerian psychology is often referred to as the psychology of courage. But it talks about the importance of reconciliation. I think a lot of times people are afraid to go, fix a problem, right? There's a conflict, right? And it's easier just to avoid it, right? Just, we'll just go away. We're not going to talk about it anymore. And just, I'll avoid you, you avoid me. But that book, really dives into the importance of reconciling, right? If there's a difference. And I think, again, that's another opportunity for people to be courageous. Probably today more than ever, is to step in and go, hey man, what do you mean by that? Why are we off here? What's going on here? Or to your point, like I don't agree with this, and we need to figure this out, right? We need to work together and figure this out. And that, that starts with that courage to be disliked, because people often aren't going to like being like criticized or saying, hey, I don't agree with what you're saying here, or I don't think you're handling this property or whatever. And I think that's that. And I think also the courage to, when it comes to that reconciliation thing, and engaging with others, is like the courage to admit you made a mistake. Like how much of that is out there? People just don't want to go, man, I messed that one up, and that's a thing. And that's the first step, I just feel like it's hard to reconcile anything if there's not an understanding that a mistake was made and a commitment that mistake's never going to be made again, right? That there was a mistake, there was a learning, and now there's a commitment, right? That takes courage on both parts, to kind of engage in that discourse, to kind of truly put stuff behind you, right? Instead of washing on, wipe it under the rug and so on.
The courage to admit when you're wrong is a big one.
That's huge, dude. Right? Like, how eat that humble pie, dude. Like doesn't always taste good at all. But yeah, like there's a lot. I mean, just think about that as a personality trait of courage, of being courageous, of just being like, right. I know there was a moment in time where I'm like, okay, just be like, I screwed that one up. Right? You learn that at some point where you just go, like, as soon as you figure out you did it wrong, it's maybe an age thing or whatever, but like, just think back to yourselves and go, when did you go, that became a verbiage for you right off your tongue to go, I screwed that one up? Because every single time I've done that, it's been so much easier than versus like, well, right. Like you're explaining you're losing type of a deal, but and it doesn't even seem like courage anymore. Right. It's just like, that's just a norm for me. Right. Like Jay, you've talked about that before. It's like that you just do bold things. Like that's part of your thing now. In your mantra in your daily life is like, what next bold thing can I find and go do? It's now become natural for you. And think about that, about just admitting you're wrong immediately and correcting it. Like, and how much more that changes your life of going, all right, I screwed that one up. Because I think what we found is if it's not life or death, and we've all been around the life or death scenarios, it's okay to just be like, I screwed that one up. Like, very courageous to just go, oh, I screwed that pooch. Like, let me go figure. Well, and everybody goes, okay, just fix it. Like, we're not born like that. I wish we were. I wish they would have been like, just admit you're good. Don't worry about it. It's all fun.
I think that's a good segue into the effect of a lack of courage, right? Because if someone made a mistake, but they're not courageous enough to step up and go, I made a mistake. Well, what's the next result of that? Well, actually, you're diminishing trust with those around you, right? So if whether you're in a leadership role or you're talking about with your peers, if you're not stepping up, owning, and kind of saying, hey, I understand I made a mistake here, and this is what I learned from it. Let's talk about not doing that. We're talking about being courageous to do it, being bold to do it, and whatever. Let's talk about what happens when you're not doing that. And when you're not doing that is, in that example, people are going, ooh, okay, well, to me, that's a trust factor, right? I'm starting to kind of challenge. I start to lose a little trust, in that person, if they're not willing to kind of step up and own a mistake. Everyone knows it, man. Just own it, like, and then if you can't do that, man, it's just. Certainly there's some disappointment there, but it's drawing on your trust capital with me, so to speak.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good topic. Very good topic.
Good topic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anything else, or we want to wrap her up?
I just got one of my favorite shirts on. I didn't even intend to wear it today, but it's Burn the Ships, right? And it just reminds me of taking bold action, right? It harkens back to when think it was Cortez, wanted to conquer the Mayans, and he told his men, "Hey, we're going to burn the ships." And they're like, "What? Like what's? No way! How are we going to get home? No, we're burning the ships. We're going to take their ships home." And it just harkens to proclaim what you want, throw it out there, be bold in what you want and desire, and go after it. And that's just how you should live your life. Be assertive.
And people are going to love you for it, right? Because we respect courage, right? You know, like, again, we talked about what it is, but just the power of it, right? Yeah, man. Like just that, man. Like, to your point, like when we see people burn the ships, as you say, and that's an awesome shirt, by the way. Where did you go get it, Jay?
DoHardThingsApparel.com.
So that whole burn the ships thing, you know, people love to see that, man. Like, you know, it's the whole man in the arena thing. It's all that stuff, right? It's, you know, to be that one that goes, look at me and go. People love it. And back to leadership, you know, and leadership being everywhere. So like, you know, the biggest form of influence is setting that example, right? So when you're out there and you're being bold and courageous, like, you're going to infect that on other people around you seeing it, right? You know, you're going to, you know, influence them and give them, again, encourage them to kind of do the same or set the example for them. So again, it's got so many tentacles for the positive. It's got so many tentacles to the negative if you're not being it. What you got, Flip?
Yeah, it's just as important too. You just mentioned it, right? Like, to Jay's point, Cortez was, oh my God, we're going to go do it, right? And so the person to be that stepper out person is important to have. It's also important to have like the courage to go, I'm going to go follow that guy because I believe in him and I believe in what they're doing. You don't need to be the one to step out. Maybe you're the one just to follow, right? Because followership is just as important as leadership in being courageous. Like, you may not have, it may be just, I'm going to go support that guy because I believe in that, or I'm going to support her because I believe. And maybe they are. Maybe, you know, there's an introvert extrovert thing here about being able to do, but you being able to find it in yourself and to go, I'm going to go, you know, Jay's going to burn a ship. I believe in his cause. I'm with it. He started it. I'm courageous enough to follow him. And I think that's right. They're both equally as important, you know, to be able to do that. I think it's just the whole concept of it, right? From start to finish is just so important, I think.
One of my favorite movies or series is The Band of Brothers. And there's one scene in particular that stands out, talks about this when they're in the Battle of the Bulge. I think it was the city of Foy near Bastogne. They did an assault and they had Captain die. And the men, he was just kind of, he was one of those kind of, you know, just punching to get the next rank or whatever. But he essentially fell apart emotionally during the battle, pinned down, and everyone was pinned down. They're losing people because he just wasn't making a decision. He was just kind of cowering. And you know, to be expected in that kind of situation, it can happen to anyone. But, you know, leadership had to make a call like, okay, you're out. We're losing people. Bring in Lieutenant, I think his name was Lieutenant Spears. He come running over there, and he courageously ran and started linking up with the next units, and they basically finished the assault and took the city. But in that moment, it was someone leading with courage and leading with fear. And how quickly and how contagious that was in that simple transition of leadership. I just found it's just an inspiring moment that just kind of harkens to this point of it's contagious. Yeah. And so we need to be aware of that.
And again, we talk about bold. It's emboldening for others, right? Even to your point where everyone in a room sees a wrong, but no one's saying it. But the minute you speak up and say, hey, man, I think this is wrong. And everyone, similarly, but small, right? Everyone else behind goes, I think it's wrong too. I think it's wrong too. Yeah, but it's right. It's so alternate ends of the spectrum as far as the severity of the physical consequence. But, you know, it's the same thing, right? It's contagious, right? Like someone has to lead, right? And take that courageous first step. So
be the one to lead.
Yeah. Be the one to lead. Don't be afraid. Be afraid, but do it anyway. There you go. Guys, thanks for hopping on today. So we're going to wrap this up here. So if any of this resonates with you, you could use some help in this area. You want to be more confident, or you want to be more productive, you want to be less distracted. That So back to everyone is challenged with these things. So whether you're in a leadership role or you're just trying to, again, be that better mom, be that better dad, be that better coach on the field, that better employee, provider, whatever. We've got different services for you guys out there in the Forge for our everyday people. That's our growth-minded community. Like I say, we just powered through a lot of courage recently. So a lot of great content out there on that. And then this is always a big topic in our leadership mastery group, with business owners and other executive leaders, because all these things matter. As we've talked about today, it's important to be leveling up and growing your courage and releasing the brakes and being bold and moving things forward. That's where you're going to get your joy and fulfillment. So if you could use any help in this area, go out to lionsguide.com, check out what we're doing. Happy to talk to you and see if it's a good fit for you. So other than that, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.